May not know that BP actually still has a business here in Russia. You're partners with Rosneft, and we'll get into that, but I'd like to begin our conversation by asking you about oil prices, of course. Russia, together with OPEC and other oil-producing nations, have extended their production cuts by 9 months. Hasn't done a whole lot to buoy the oil price since then. Are you surprised?
Well, it's an unprecedented agreement to have the OPEC countries and some really large major non-OPEC countries get together. I think it has stabilized to a degree the oil markets. I mean, I think had they not come to that agreement, we'd see a lower oil price. I think on a daily basis, it's actually bringing supply and demand back into balance. OPEC wants to get it down to the average stock levels in the world over the average of the last 5 years. It'll take some time, but I think it's going in the right direction.
Brent is just slightly north of $50. Had the cuts not been extended, where would it be?
I think it's hard to say. There's other factors. Libyan production is coming on. There's some other factors out there, but keeping everything equal, we would probably be in the 40s in the Brent. So I think this is
40. Well, 40 certainly something. 40s, but yeah. Low 40s.
Probably not. Probably not. I think there's much impact by Libyan production has come on, and so Nigerian production is a little bit healthy. All these things can go up and down. Shale production continues to rise a bit. But getting these agreements in place to keep the oil price between 50 and 60, I think, is probably the objective, and I think that's a healthy oil price for the world. So the futures curve suggests that oil is going to be trading in the 50s once these cuts expire 9 months from now. What reason is there to believe that that's the case? If the cuts were required to keep oil from dropping into the 40s now, why wouldn't more cuts be required to keep oil from dropping into the 40s 9 months from now? Well, the futures curve, there's so many variables. It depends on what happens by next spring. When they get together, they'll look at all the data, they'll look and see how the markets responded, see if they extend it or make another agreement. I think we won't know until the very last minute. That's sort of their business, but the fact that the level of communication and cooperation is sort of unprecedented between the countries, I think they're sort of working together on this.
There is some concern, if you will, at the very least interest, in the question of whether OPEC and the Russians and the others have trapped themselves into sort of a permacut situation. That you just have to keep extending the cuts because otherwise you end up with an oil price that's too low to satisfy your needs.
A lot of variables still, Erik.
Is that a possibility, though?
I wouldn't say they've trapped themselves into something, but I think there's still a lot of variables. Demand levels continue to rise. Economic growth continues to grow. That's a one in one direction. I worry about stability of Venezuelan production. There's a lot of production, could be. Libya's up and down a little bit, and I mean, it could go up and down either way, either direction in here.
How do these cuts affect the production share that you get from Rosneft and in other countries as well, the UAE, for example, and Azerbaijan?
We do have a 19.75% share of Rosneft. So as Rosneft reduces production, along with their share of the Russian production, we do see that go down. We see some of Azerbaijan's commitments to reduce. We're a big producer in Azerbaijan, and some of the concessions in Abu Dhabi. But I think that the loss of production, because we'd rather go for value over volume, the value of the higher price as a result of these reductions probably offsets itself, so it doesn't really impact BP much.
In other words, you see it exactly the same way that they do?
I do, yes.
Have we reached a point where OPEC, again, together with its partners, is beginning to take more control over the global oil price, or is this really just a temporary situation?
Well, I think, the shales is the big, who's the swing producers now? Saudi Arabia, or is it the shales? The shales are perfectly healthy to keep growing, particularly in the Permian, but there's
West
differences
Texas.
in West Texas, all right. But I think this is not a question that's been answered yet by the markets. I mean, some of the countries can, in one decision, impact production very quickly and change the market levels. And I think what I think, you'll have to talk to the OPEC ministers, but I think they also don't want any sharp shocks in this either.
No, clearly that's one of the things they're trying to avoid. But the reason that, and I don't need to tell this to you, it's more for everybody else, that shale has become the swing producer is because costs, particularly in the Permian, continue to crater. I mean,
they are coming down. There's also a lot of companies that aren't generating cash. They take the money and put it back in. I don't see the cash going back to shareholders, so it's an economic model that is not crystal clear to everybody either.
Well, let me ask you this question. If that being the case, let's assume WTI fetches $50. It's not quite there, but let's assume it fetches $50. How much longer can those, I'll call them zombie producers, continue to pump?
I think the Permian Basin is the exception. It can operate in the $30 range. So the big Permian Basin in West Texas can. I think it'll be more difficult than some of the other basins, which when we talk about shales, everybody includes in the definition of shale. But I think the Permian Basin can go lower than that.
And globally, how much further can you see costs going down? Because they aren't just going down in shale country. We've seen them go down in some of the deep water areas as well.
Well, it wasn't that long ago. The oil and gas business made money at $25 a barrel, $40 a barrel. This is a massive readjustment of costs that can come down, and they will come down around the world. Technology will change, make it more efficient. But there's no question greater recoveries from reservoirs. So we can, as an industry, continue down a cost curve with lower prices and still be profitable.
What's BP's break even right now?
Today, it's because of some deals that we did this year, we're above $55 a barrel. But when we look out over the next 5 years with the plans that we have, the projects, we can see break-even costs in the $35 to $38 a barrel range.
And how is this year going for you so far?
This year is a good year. It's an important year for BP. We have 7 major projects that will come on in the upstream. We've got 3 of them have already started up. The other 4 are on track, under budget. So this is an important year for BP to get back within a financial framework. We've had our own special circumstances with fines and penalties in the Gulf of Mexico. Those are set now. Now we can plan the company.
Given that we're in Russia, if the United States and the Europeans were to relax sanctions on Russia, would that create an opportunity for BP to do more business here? And if so, would you seize that opportunity?
You know, Eric, we do business today well within the boundaries of the sanctions. We have a lot of work, and we have new work and projects that we plan. For us, it's about maintaining a disciplined capital framework that we've laid out to our shareholders that we're going to stay within. So we've got a lot to do, and that's probably the barrier rather than just wanting to do things.
So it's more a question of whether the funds would be available as opposed to whether you'd have the appetite to do it with Rosneft or anybody else.
Yes, we work with Rosneft in Russia, but it is our financial framework that will keep us disciplined over the next 5 years. There's a lot of things we'd like to do in Russia and other places of the world, but we're going to maintain that discipline.
Bob, as you're well aware, President Trump needs to make a decision about whether to stay in or to drop out of the Paris Accord on climate change. What's your position, and what message would you send to the president?
Well, we have been clear in our support of the climate agreement in Paris. We were part of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, which is 10 of the big companies in the world who are working towards projects and technologies that are needed. I think we all want to know how the formula will work, but I think the concept of Paris needs to stay in everybody's mind on the issues of we've got to transition the world to a lower carbon forms of energy. I have no doubt it will happen. So I think we need to be really clear, rather than just walking away from it, what do you put in place in that in the United States? It's an important topic.
Well, to what degree is that transition at risk? Are market forces going to drive that transition no matter what happens, or does it need the Paris Agreement to accelerate it?
It may not be the Paris Agreement. It needs the commitment by governments and countries around the world who really, all the growth in energy consumption and population is really going to be Asia and South Asia. I believe those countries, if they drive cleaner air, cleaner energy, and have government policies which support that, that's going to help in the right direction. It's vitally important in the right direction. So to me, that's the epicenter of this. There's about 1 giant coal-fired power plant being built a week now in Asia, and you install that capacity, it's there, the CO2 is there. So if anybody's interested, in my opinion, I think some of the world's multilateral national funding agencies like the World Bank and others should think about how to create the right incentives to fund natural gas projects and renewables projects together in some of these areas where CO2 emissions are going to go up.
But if I understand you, you believe it would help if the U.S. stayed in the Paris Accord.
we support the Paris Accord. I think it would be good if they did, but if they're not going to do it, they need to put in place something else that heads in the trajectory of low carbon transition.
Does it make sense to you at all that BP supports the Paris Accord, ExxonMobil supports the Paris Accord, countless other oil companies support the Paris Accord, and yet the U.S. might withdraw?
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to withdraw. Last I've heard, Eric, there's quite a debate going on about it, so I don't know.